I don't want to call this the Ruthless Podcast. I want to call this the Haley Welch Podcast because each one of these guys so far have just on JD Vance's cock.
Well, it's like the old Sun Tzu quote, right? Like when your enemy's making a mistake, don't interrupt them. I was just like, shut up. That was the.
Oh, I'm reading. I know the Art of War. That's from the Art of War.
Thing, JD. Silence.
Nice. That is true. If you guys have not read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, you should totally do it. It is great. Apply it to all aspects of your life, whether it be, and not in relationships. So I shouldn't say all aspects of your life, but in the aspects of life where you want to win, and maybe it's in like your work and competition. Especially if you're an athlete, very good book for you to understand the mentality around humans. So the Ruthless Podcast has an exclusive JD Vance first podcast or excuse me, I can't even read. JD Vance first post-debate interview. Man, this is a podcast, Ruthless Podcast. We're just going to sit back, listen to it. I'm going to do as little pausing as I can back and forth, but if I have an opinion on something, you guys already know. I like to yap.
Your attention, please.
Just a catching strays over here.
You're in for a hell of a show. Keep the faith. Hold the line and own the libs.
It's time for
Hold the line and own the leg. What a slogan.
Well, welcome to a very special episode of the Ruthless Variety Program. John Ashbrook, Josh Holmes, Comfortably Smug, Michael Duncan, left to right across your radio dial. We're in a little different position here, but for good reason. We're in Michigan, fellas.
That's right. And we had promised everyone we're going to have a very special surprise for them.
Yeah.
And we certainly do.
And we do. As you are watching this, we just finished up our fishing trip with JD Vance.
Yeah.
And look, he's had a very big week. We're very happy to have him, but what better way to come down from kicking the ass of Tim Walz than a little fishing, and a little
Jesus
salmon,
Christ.
and some camaraderie with the fellas, right?
Okay, so
We
this
had
is going
such
to
a
be
great
biased at all.
time, and I mean, this is an animal podcast. This is a politics podcast. This podcast is a lot of things, and it's about to turn into a fishing show,
Yeah, it is
which is sort of a dream.
It totally is. And so what you're going to see with us here today, JD comes in after our fishing trip, and we're going to have a long-form discussion about the week, about the race, about a little bit about sportsman issues, a whole bunch of stuff. I think you're going to love every second of it. And fellas, we had a good time, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean, great time, and it's great to get the perspective of
Every single one of these guys just screams, "Dad."
JD after that debate. I mean, this is a big get for the Ruthless
Maybe
Variety program.
minus this guy.
and to
minus
get his
him,
like
minus
off the
him.
cuff, comments about like how he was feeling in the moment and all that sort of stuff. It's just incredible.
Yeah, first major
Nothing
interview
wrong with
Yeah.
that, by the way.
putting this race
Nothing
down.
wrong.
Yeah.
I mean,
Nothing
they
at
had
all.
50 million people watching the vice presidential debate.
Yeah.
That's an extraordinarily huge number.
It's a lot more than Tim Walz was hoping would be watching.
No question about it. So sit back, enjoy, relax, as this is live to tape at 5 o'clock. But we're hoping to stick around. We got some travel arrangements, but hopefully we're going to be in your YouTube comments and being able to answer any questions that you have as you are watching. So thanks for joining us.
Hey, two buddies, it is game time. Out of these two thumbnails, one of them scored 40% more clicks than the other. Can you guess which one?
One on the left. Bigger font.
Well, look, we
Easier
got a
to
really
read.
special guest here, and it's been a big week for
Straight
him.
to the point.
But we just had a fishing trip. JD Vance, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
I'm excellent.
JD
we had some
looks-
fun out there, didn't we?
We just
Out of all the dudes here, this guy kind of seems like he's dressed the most like a normal dude. Everyone else like that. I don't know.
some fun. We
I'm
didn't
sorry,
catch
I'm
any
judging.
fish unless you count the frozen dead fish.
I got a
that
couple.
Smug caught. But no, it was really fun. We took, as you know, I'm sure the clips will show. We took my 4-year-old out there, and I was actually really curious whether he would have fun or just be like, "What the hell are we
Get me
doing?"
off of this
He
thing.
loved it.
Yeah, he had a
He was
blast.
having a good time, so it was good.
Well, it was nice that these guys tried to cheat their way into victory by having frozen fish reeled up. So at least
Oh
your
my
son could
gosh.
see fish.
Well, I mean, my first thought when I saw the fish being reeled was like, it's not moving. Is it normal for a fish? He's just gotten caught. Like,
Early morning.
I've caught enough fish to know that normally they fight at least a little bit. Yeah, like maybe. Yeah,
It was an early morning,
maybe
it
the
was a
fish were all
cold
drunk or
lake.
something. But then I was like, there's no way that they would throw a ringer out there, that they would bring a dead
Audio
frozen
is
fish
not the
just
best.
to win the fishing
Do we have the same
competition.
mic?
But
I think I got
clearly
the same mic as them.
overestimated you guys.
We didn't really have a choice. We had everything short of a carrier group out there, you know, for security.
Yeah, no, I think in our defense, as our skill as fishermen, I think it's probably hard to catch a fish when you have
Mike,
like
An
it is.
armada?
like a literal armada floating around. We're like
I gotta turn this
Kalamazoo
down.
River.
The echoing, that's kind of giving me a headache.
And the 45-foot Coast Guard boat with with a saw machine gun.
Yeah.
It's like-
Pretty cool to look at.
yeah, it was very cool to look at, but it probably didn't help the fish. So anyway,
Well, listen, I mean, I'm glad we could get you away from things just for a moment to try to get some clean
Yeah.
air and whatever. You had a
was very
huge
nice.
week with a absolute butt kicking, I can say it so you don't have to, of Tim Walz on the VP debate stage. I mean, I said this to you on the boat, but I really mean it. Like, I think he might have earned his vote that night. He was nodding along with almost everything you said.
I hope so, man. We'll take every vote we can get. Tim, if you're listening, you're welcome to vote for us. You don't have to tell anybody about it. But I think we have a good shot in
Jesus.
Minnesota. It's an
Nice.
outside chance, but we've got a shot in Minnesota. I mean, look, it was such a crazy week. My team, when they first brought this to me, and were like, well, you know, what about doing this thing? They were very nervous. Well, it's a couple days after the debate. Like, are you really
You'd be
want to go
exhausted.
fishing after the debate? It's like, of course I want to go fishing after the debate. Like, that's the one thing I'd actually look to do after the debate. But I'm glad you guys took me out. And, you know, it's sort of one of these things we try to do is, because we have such young kids, 7, 4, and 2, is bring my son out with me or
Yeah.
bring one of them out with me. And so, you know, we did the whole hotel thing. He got to watch a movie. He got to eat a lot of junk food that mom wouldn't normally let him eat. So
Did he sleep
it was overall
perpendicular
good.
in the bed with
Oh
you
my
last
God,
night?
yeah. So
That's what my kids
It's like
do.
we have a king size bed. I'm on one little corner of it, and he still finds some way to sleep with his like foot in my neck last night. So if I'm like a little underslept this morning because of that. But I mean, the debate was so much fun, and I was telling Josh this earlier on the boat. Like, you don't really know when you're doing this because your adrenaline's going. You're
Right.
trying not to say anything stupid. You don't actually know how it's going, really. Like, I felt pretty good about it, but my wife comes out at the very end, just as sort of like this one final, you know, segment for the TV cameras. Gwen Waltz comes up and my wife comes up, and I look at Usha's face, and I just knew. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
shit.
Nice.
We must have done a very good job because Usha doesn't lie to me,
Yeah.
and her face especially doesn't lie to me, and I knew that minute
Hell
that we
yeah.
had a very good debate.
That's
Nobody
cool.
gives you
You know that means he has a good
authentic
relationship with his wife too.
Exactly.
I mean, I had
Like
a
if Lo
question.
gives me a
My
look,
question was,
sometimes she
how
says
does
a
it
full
feel
sentence
to
with just
kill
a
a
look.
man live on stage.
Fuck you.
Because you had to have known eventually when his eyes were bugging out, and it was just to me and seeing the reaction online. In the first 5 minutes, I think it was already over.
I mean, it definitely, you know, the first answer, because it was about the attacks on Israel and how Israel should respond, and I definitely realized like he was extremely nervous.
He said fundamental 3 times in 20 seconds.
That's normally a tell.
And then he talked about
But-
Israel proxies. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, so there's definitely, I could tell he was nervous.
Yeah.
But again, you can't really tell how nervous, like how you're doing, because I'm nervous as hell, right?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Like I get nervous at these things, and so you can't really tell how it's actually going. Like I didn't think that I had said anything bad. I thought that I had said, in fact, a number of good things. So I did feel pretty good about it. The one thing I didn't realize, this thing that's gone super viral.
I know I said I wouldn't pause too much, but I do appreciate that the fact that he does own up, that he does get nervous during these things. You know, yeah, no, that's cool. Good for you.
Of me kind of doing the gym.
That takes
from
a lot
the
of
office
courage
thing,
to admit.
looking into the camera. It's
That's what I was thinking. It's like you have to have known. Like, can you believe how easy this is?
but it's because I wish I could take credit for it, but it's because I guess the timer is right by the camera. So I was just, I was trying to pay attention to what he's saying, but then you have to be ready for like when his time's up because then it's your turn to speak. And so I was looking at the timer. I was about to speak.
Amazing.
I know, but it spawned a million viral memes. So I'm glad they did it like that.
I think I saw you give Smug a similar look when he walked up with the frozen fish.
We know that came out the freezer.
The full broken fourth wall. Oh man, I think the thing that was most impressive. I mean, look, a lot of us have done a lot of these things in debate preps and things like that, and it's one thing to have the right answers, which you did, and it's
I don't know
better
who
when it's
they are, so I'm
authentic,
just
which
gonna
it
take his
is.
word for that.
The thing that is so impressive about what you did in that debate is you say you're nervous. You look so composed your tone, your tenor, the way you were delivering it, it was like a man at total peace with what he was talking about. And I think that conveys, right? I mean, look, it turns out there's over 50 million people watching the damn thing.
Yeah.
So
Which I'm glad I didn't know then. 'Cause-
yeah, seriously.
But it's, yeah, I mean, so I definitely, again, I felt good about it. I think nerves are a good thing, actually.
Yeah.
You know, it's good to sort of
Keeps you sharp.
You know, keeps you sharp, keeps you focused. That's fundamentally a good thing. But it's funny. We went into it, and I think they thought our strategy was just going to be to go after Waltz. You know, for like, you know, the military record, dishonesty, and there's like the Tiananmen Square thing. That was like that was the one moment where I realized, okay, he's clearly very uncomfortable.
No, he didn't need your help. He buried himself on it.
It's like the old Sun Tzu quote, right? Like when your enemy's making a mistake, don't interrupt them. I was just like, shut up. That was the.
Oh, I'm reading. I know the Art of
Do
War.
not
That's from
say
the Art of
damn
War.
Thing, JD. Silence.
Nice. That is true. If you guys have not read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, you should totally do it. It is great. Apply it to all aspects of your life, whether it be, and not in relationships. So I shouldn't say all aspects of your life, but in the aspects of life where you want to win, and maybe it's in like your work and competition. Especially if you're an athlete, very good book for you to understand the mentality around humans. But I don't want to call this the Ruthless Podcast. I want to call this the Haley Welch Podcast because each one of these guys so far have just on JD Vance's cock.
But I what actually President Trump and I were talking about this sort of about a week before the debate. It's like, okay, why go after Tim Walz when people are primarily voting for Kamala Harris or against Kamala Harris or
That
for
makes
Donald
sense.
Trump or against Donald Trump? And importantly, unlike with Donald Trump and Joe Biden, where everybody has an opinion about these guys, right? Like it's very hard. I mean, you guys are all like political professionals. Like, what negative advertisement is a person going to see about Donald Trump? Everybody has an opinion about him one way or the other, but people really don't know Kamala Harris.
Right.
And it's kind of surprising to those of us who live and breathe politics, but a lot of people still don't realize, like, she's the sitting vice president. She bears the responsibility, in some cases even casting the tie-breaking vote on some of these policies. So, like, why not use this as an opportunity to get the word out about who Kamala Harris really is? And so because of that, I was like, I don't really have to like debate Tim Walz.
Yeah.
I'm really going to debate Kamala Harris. And even sometimes where I think Tim had taken like a position oppositional to Kamala Harris, like why don't highlight that as an example of her radicalism rather than get in a back and forth with Tim Walz?
Yeah, and you
I
said
think
it
that was the
best.
right. I think ultimately that was the right strategy. I mean, I was a little bit worried going into it that like he's just going to attack me and I'm not going to respond to it. It's like, hey, he's going to call me an asshole and I'm going to be like, the real asshole is Kamala Harris. But, like, so is that, like,
Oh my
work
God.
actually
Okay.
in the debate moment? But I actually think
All right,
it did
JD.
work,
It
and
did
I'm
work.
glad we did it.
You were
JD just seems
honest.
like a
You were
real ass
like,
dude,
Tim,
which
you
is
had
crazy.
a hard job tonight.
That was
He does not seem like a
Because they're trying to
politician.
pull this magic trick where she's the change agent candidate.
That's right.
And not the current vice president of the United States. And, you have the last 4 years of Donald Trump being president of the United States you can point to as a record of success. So, like, yeah, it was a little tough for the guy.
Yeah. Well, that was the one thing. I think it was in the Israel-Iran answer where he's like, Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon, and this is all Donald Trump's fault. I go, wait a second. Donald Trump was president like 4 years ago. Do you have any idea who's been running the country for the last 3.5 years? Like, I'll give you a wild guess. It's the person who's at the top of the ticket for you guys. And it does illustrate. I mean, again, you guys know this stuff better than I do, but like sometimes in races, it's really complicated. It's really hard. If you're the incumbent party and the economy's really bad, that's a tough
sell.
product to sell. Well, they're in the incumbent party, and the economy's bad, I think, because of their policies. So,
And they've done
it's
everything they
just-
can do to get out from underneath that,
Exactly.
by the way. They're trying to pretend like she's just showed up yesterday.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
That she's
and
just-
it's
just been running
bait and
for the past
switch here
70
is really
days.
fascinating,
But
right?
she hasn't
Because
had all
when
the time in
Biden was the
politics, but
candidate,
yet she's the most
I'd
qualified
watch these,
person
like Sunday shows,
because of that time
and
in
you'd have people
politics.
going on and be like, oh no, inflation's great. Like things are starting to look really good, and the economy's doing wonderful. And here are all these great things that Joe Biden did. And then the minute Kamala becomes the candidate, they're all like, oh, Joe Biden was a terrible president. Nothing to do with them. But it's just, again, it doesn't pass the smell test for most Americans, and we're going to find out November 5th. But I think it does give us a much better argument.
No question about
Another
it.
thing that really stood out to us, we talked about it on our show earlier this week, is how much you listened to what Walls was saying. So many of these people go into a debate and they get their canned lines and they try to deliver them and their mind is off. But you were so well prepared. You knew exactly what you were going to say about every single thing, that you were able to listen to him and interact with him in a way that I think stood out for a lot of people.
Yeah. No, I think when I go into these things, I try not to do the slogan thing. I try not to do the can line thing. I try to actually answer the questions, which in some cases, I think I probably try too hard to answer the question, especially when it's like an unfair question, because sometimes you just got to say, that's a stupid question. Let's talk about things that the American people actually care about.
Particularly when the opposition, every question they're asked, they tell you about their growing up with streetlights and bicycles.
Hey, he's proud of that record of service.
So you definitely obviously have to hit your themes, and there are things that you want to. There's a message that you want to deliver to the American people, and you have to not try to get knocked off balance. But I do think it's important to actually just listen to what people are talking about and responding to it. And I think it's one of the things that people really are turned off by with Kamala Harris, right? It's like, what is your specific plan to solve the inflation crisis? And it's like, oh, I grew up in a middle-class family, or, I worked at McDonald's and I was really good at making the hash browns. It's like, what the hell are you talking about?
Can you imagine ordering a sandwich somewhere and they're like, well, I live in a middle-class family and I'm from it's like, just give me the bologna sandwich.
Right. Yeah, so this is a Wendy's. It does, I think it does drive home that just being responsive is just a breath of fresh air in politics in the 21st century. And so I definitely just, I try to do that. And it also, look, Tim, you go into this debate, right? And Tim and I both know.
I love
this is not, you're
Donald
not
Trump
playing
hands.
to your base. You got 50 million plus people watching you.
This
You're
is
trying
not
to
the
make
Trump
a pitch
hands.
to undecided voters, right? So he's going to say a lot of things where even sometimes explicitly he's going to agree with Donald Trump's policies. So rather than being like, no, you're wrong, we're like, oh yeah, you made a really good point there, but here's why that point has nothing to do with Kamala Harris's policies, and that's what I kept on trying to take it
And
back
that's the
to.
listening component that you were talking
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it really stood out.
No, I appreciate you guys noticing that, because that's definitely something I try to do when I do these things, is just actually listen, have a conversation with people.
Like normal humans?
Yeah, like normal humans.
Man, that is a breath of fresh air. That whole conversation right there. We're about halfway through. I'm going to link it down below if you want to listen to the full thing. I want to stop it there because I feel like we could listen and continue on, but just listening to what they just said right there, I hope somebody out there will feel me. When you go into these large corporations or you work in maybe like a big company, right, and you're talking to your boss, does it ever really feel like they're listening to you, listening to understand? With all the books and the leadership courses that I've taken, I've come to realize there's 3 levels of listening. You have level 1 listening is to respond, not even to respond, but just to hear. It's just one ear out the other. There's nothing. Then the second one is you're listening and you're kind of going back and forth, but you're just doing it to kind of do small talk. You're not really kind of in the conversation. And then level 3 is sitting back, taking your ego out of that conversation and just legitimately hearing what they have to say, pushing back on it and going back and forth, and not pushing back on it in a sense of like, no, you're wrong, but just like expand and expand and expand, and not this just the small talk. And I wish I could articulate this better. Maybe in another video I can, but I hope that resonates with somebody out there. And if it does, hit that like button, subscribe, share this video with your friends, and I will catch you guys on the next one. And this isn't always going to be political, just FYI, if you're still here at the video. I'm not always going to do political stuff. It's whatever I find interesting on the internet. That could be anime, that could be sports, that's more than likely going to be gaming and pop culture news. But right now, the election is important, and I think, at least in America, this is the most important election of my lifetime.